Welcome to Fertility and Wholeness with Ariana, where we have honest conversations about the joys and challenges about the fertility journey. I'm your host, Ariana, and today we're addressing the topic that is often whispered about, but rarely spoken out loud. What happens when the pain of infertility intersects with the pain of abortion? For some women, infertility is an isolating experience, filled with grief, sadness, and anger. For others, the journey is complicated by a past abortion, whether it's their own or someone they love. These two experiences might seem like worlds apart, but emotionally, they can feel strikingly similar. The isolation, the shame, and the longing for healing. Here's the question we're asking today. Can healing from the past help us move forward with our fertility journey? And what does it take to face these emotions with honesty and grace? In this first part of my conversation with Brittany Poppe, a Christian abortion recovery leader and a pro life speaker, we'll explore how unresolved grief can impact our ability to embrace hope. Whether or not abortion is part of your story, this episode is about breaking down walls of isolation and finding wholeness together. Stay with us as we dive into this powerful conversation. We are tackling the hard questions and offering hope along the way. Welcome to Fertility and Wholeness Podcast. Are you tired of seeing that test be negative month after month? Will you ever stop having to take test after test? Are you scared of all the medical terminology, office visits, and misinformation you see at every turn on your infertility journey? If you answer yes to any of those, you're not alone. You are at the right place. I'm so happy you're here with us. My name is Ariana. I'm a fertility care practitioner and a wholeness coach with over a decade of experience on the field. I created this podcast because I know what it is to feel alone and lost while navigating fertility problems. And after helping hundreds of women, teaching them how to not protract their cycles, boost their fertility, and navigate their monthly emotional roller coaster and get pregnant naturally, I am on a mission to empower women to take charge of their fertility journey. In this podcast, you will find heartfelt conversations, education, tips on how to take care of and understand your fertility, emotional support, simple lifestyle changes to boost your fertility, nutrition, self-care routines, tips for handling stress and anxiety with ease. We have amazing, exciting expert interviews and guests, inspirational stories, and practical advice on preparing for pregnancy and joyful delivery. Are you ready to reclaim your health, your life, and become pregnant naturally? If so, grab your green juice and prenatal vitamins. This episode is just what the doctor ordered.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thankful to be able to share some hope with the women who might be listening to your podcast. When I was 17 years old, I had kind of found myself living a double life. I had grown up with a pretty strong faith and was pretty much a really good kid, did my homework, listened to my parents, all of those things. They didn't really have to worry about me. But I lost my dad actually when I was 15. He passed away from a terminal illness. And I just kind of started to spiral into some toxic behaviors. And one of those toxic behaviors was a lot of lying. And so I started seeing a boy that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. And I found out that I was pregnant about a year and a half after I had started seeing him. And even though I had grown up valuing life and feeling like all life was created in the image of God and all life mattered, in that moment, all I could think about was how could I continue living this double life? And my own self-preservation was really at the front of my mind. And so I made the unfortunate decision to have an abortion without any parental consent. There are some laws in certain states that allow minors to obtain abortions without any parental consent. And so what I thought was going to allow me to continue living this double life and continue just without ever having to think about the fact that I had gotten pregnant or what I had done. Really, honestly, it was quite the opposite. It really kind of just ruined my life in a way that I hadn't even imagined, because I just had completely gone against everything I had grown up believing. And there was a lot of grief with it too that I didn't realize at the time was grief. I went through a lot of different stages of grief, anger being one of them. For many years, I would fly off the handle at the littlest things. I actually struggled a lot with road rage. I even went to see a therapist because it was just so bad. And I never got to the root of my problem. I always was just trying to treat the symptoms that I was experiencing, but I never actually got to the root of the trauma that I had been experiencing for so many years after my abortion. And eventually I did get married. I had kind of started to come back to my faith a little bit. As I said earlier, I'm a Christian. And so I started going to church. And shortly after my husband and I got married, we found out we were having our first baby. And I was so excited, but also at the same time, almost the same level of devastated, not because I wasn't so grateful for my daughter, but because I felt like I didn't deserve to have more babies. I thought God was going to punish me all this time by not allowing me to have any more children. And so the fact that I was having another child really just brought a ton of shame and guilt to the forefront of my mind. And I remember being so afraid during my pregnancy that something was going to happen to me, or that I was going to lose her, or that something was going to happen to her during birth. And about 3 hours after she was born, I was being checked by my nurse. And all of a sudden, before I even knew what was going on, my hospital room flooded with medical personnel. What was happening was I was having a postpartum hemorrhage, and they were really struggling to get my bleeding to stop. And I just remember thinking in that moment that I was being punished for what I had done when I was 17 years old, and I wasn't going to get to go home from the hospital with my new baby. And they did stop my bleeding. Thankfully, by the grace of God, I did not have to have too many medical interventions, but I did not leave the hospital okay at all. I was very mentally unstable, postpartum depression severely, to the point where I thought about ending my life often. And I firmly believe that my postpartum depression was likely caused by the trauma that I had experienced and the guilt and shame that I hadn't healed from my past decision of abortion. And so, fast forward a couple of years, I did get out of that dark period of my life, but I was far from healed and ended up finding out I was pregnant again. And again, all of those emotions just like came to the forefront. All of the guilt. Why am I being able to have this beautiful child when so many women struggle to have children? And I gave up my first child. And I did end up having another postpartum hemorrhage with him as well. And again, just the guilt. But I had a friend who had also had an abortion, and I reached out to her because by this point, I knew that my abortion was probably the root cause of a lot of my mental health issues, and quite possibly my physical issues with having children and hemorrhaging during childbirth. And so I reached out to my friend and just said, actually, she has an abortion recovery ministry. And I masked asking for help by offering to help with her ministry. And she's a very wise woman and is a great friend of mine today, and someone who I'm thankful to call a mentor. And she actually replied to me and said, you know what? We're having a Forgiven and Set Free Bible study that's starting next week. And I would just really love if you would join us. And so I did. And I learned that I didn't need to live life thinking that I was going to be punished for what I had done, that my sins have been washed clean. and that God does not withhold gifts from us when we repent and surrender to Him and live our life for Him. And so that's kind of what led me here now. I feel like He placed a calling on my heart to share that message, because there are so many women living in bondage from shame and guilt that need to be set free.
That is a journey. I think that a lot of my listeners, and I'm so thankful and honored that you're sharing this with us today. And I know you mentioned kind of like some of the physical and mental effects of going
Mhm.
through something in our earlier years, thinking that that's going to give us answer, that's going to give us a relief that we're looking for. And we just end up in a deeper hole.
Yeah. So I think I touched on my anger. That was one of the big things when I look back, because when I look at who I was before I had an abortion, I wasn't really an angry person. I was pretty calm, pretty cool and collected, usually a very positive person. And then it's like I went through my abortion and I turned a complete 180 and was a completely different person. So lots of anger. And we know that unhealed trauma and unresolved grief and shame can weigh down on us and cause us to feel those things. I also would say that I kind of lost my sense of femininity. I had kind of gone against something that I feel like we as women were created to do. We were created to be nurturing human beings. And so I think I kind of felt internally like I wasn't that type of a person anymore. And so it's funny, I can look back at pictures of myself from those lost years, and I look at myself in the mirror now and I don't even recognize that person. Even some people close to me, I'm like, this is what I looked like back then. And they're like, you don't even look the same. It's kind of a weird, complete, like physical transformation too, that I wouldn't have guessed could change me so much. But I think a lot of it is in that loss of femininity for a while.
It's like a shadow kind of
Yeah.
takes over you, right?
Yes.
So, and just going a little bit into your relationship, you got married. Is it something that you were able to share with your husband from the beginning? Is it something that you felt like you needed to disclose before getting married? I know a lot of women going into marriage sometimes have to make that decision. Do I disclose or not disclose this?
hmm Yeah, that's a great question. So I did tell my husband actually pretty shortly after we started dating. My husband, I knew how he had grown up. I kind of knew what his beliefs were. And so I was afraid that if he knew that about me, he wouldn't want to be with me anymore. And I didn't want to get too deep into a relationship with him if he was going to end it over something like that. So I did tell him, but I don't know the exact statistics on that, and I would be interested to know what they are. But I do know many, many, many women who enter marriages and do not tell their husbands because they are so terrified that their husbands are going to leave them or think differently of them or not come alongside them in their grief and their, processing their trauma. So I know that many women do live with that secret in their marriages.
But sadly, and it waits on them and it waits on their marriage.
Mhm.
So, what will you tell the women that is still hiding, that is still saying, I don't want to say that, we already been married so many years? Why disclose that now? Because I've had women in my services that really choose not to. And
Mm.
I can see how it waits on them. And obviously, it's a personal decision between them, God, and what they want to do with that. But what will you tell them?
Yeah. So I think, regardless of where your religious background is, when we marry somebody, we're becoming one with them, right? And I know that seems kind of to be more so of the Christian kind of background with marriage, but I would say if you are marrying someone, that means that that person is the person that you are closest to. Ideally, right? That's what we want in a marriage. We want that person to literally be the closest person to us. They know so much more about us than anyone else besides ourselves. And when we're in a relationship, a marriage relationship, and we don't tell them that those deep pieces of us, that can really weigh down on a marriage negatively. And especially too, I'm so thankful that I did tell my husband because when I was going through my postpartum depression, a lot of it stemmed from guilt and feeling like I didn't deserve to be a mom and I didn't deserve my baby. And if he didn't know about what I'd gone through, I don't think, not that he was prepared for it, because he certainly was not. I'm so thankful how he came alongside me in that. I'm very grateful for him. But it was so much easier when I finally was able to recognize what it was from, that I could go to him. So often women that I talk to who have had abortions, their number one thing is, I feel alone. And I feel alone in this. So I think, your spouse definitely should know. And if you don't know how you're going to tell them, then that's something that you just need to be in prayer about, and not just go blurt it out to them, or things like that. But with preparation and prayer and planning, I think that you would be surprised how your spouse would act.
Well, thank you. I think of a lot of women under the other side. I really appreciate your words. And I also would like for you to share with us, what were the specific things that you did to overcome all these obstacles? Because here you are with the second child, second difficult delivery, battling all your mental past decisions, right? Past decisions that now that were showing up. Tell us about, how do you overcome all these obstacles? We want to know more.
Yeah. So I mentioned I did go through a Bible study. It was called Forgiven and Set Free, and it's an amazing Bible study. It's non-denominational, so you don't have to be any specific faith set to go through this Bible study. I do facilitate this Bible study now. We actually do even have women who will come and say, I need help, but I am not a Christian. I'm actually not religious, but I need help, so I'm willing to give it a try. And they actually find it quite helpful as well. But I went through that Bible study, and I feel like getting back to my faith foundation and recognizing that I think so often some Christians who haven't necessarily gone to a church or a place that really teaches them about God's character, like his true character, I think we end up having this wrong view of who he is and how he responds to past decisions we might make or sins we may have committed. And so I had this constant view that I was running away from a punishment that was impending, this like impending doom that would follow me everywhere, or how you described it earlier, kind of like a shadow. And I learned that that's not how God's character works. And so it was a lot of really just kind of digging into that and having that foundation. But another thing that was really important was allowing myself to have permission to grieve the loss of my child. Because even though I lost my child through a choice I made, I still lost a child. I believe that my child was a living human being growing, and I don't have that child anymore. And so I had to recognize that that was the loss of a real person, and I needed to be able to grieve him. And I say him, I was so early, I don't know 100% certainty, but I do feel like I've been given clarity from the Lord on my child's gender and his name even. But being able to call my child by name and recognize that his life still mattered and God can still use him has helped me tremendously in my healing.
What you're sharing is very deep, and I think a lot of women can also relate to you because they have suffered miscarriages, even though those babies are wanted. They don't know the gender. They don't know. Sometimes people don't even know they were pregnant. I also have encountered women that have had infertility treatments, IVF, and their embryos are lost. And also, they don't have a name for it. They don't have the miscarriage label or the abortion label. They just have embryos that didn't survive the implantation. And they're like lost in this process. They don't even have a support group to go to. Where do you go when your embryo doesn't survive that transfer? So is there anything that you can say? Because those lives are also lost. right? And they're created with love.
Mhm.
Couple wants this baby, but at the same
Mhm.
time, there is this byproduct of going through an infertility treatment like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You say how lonely that is, and that's what I was thinking too. How lonely that must be to experience such a devastating loss, but feel like you have nowhere to go to grieve that loss. I think what I would say to a woman, if she was face to face with me right now and was struggling with that, I would just say, those are the lives too of your children, and if we believe that those are true living human beings, you absolutely just need to give yourself permission to grieve. And society might or not recognize it in the way that they should, but God absolutely does. And it wants to come alongside you and allow you to grieve what you've lost. And I think, too, even it's been helpful, I've seen, with women who have had abortions or miscarriages, or, what you're saying, have lost their embryos. Sometimes it's really helpful for women to name those children. So giving them an identity and a name and recognizing them for who they are can really help in the grieving process a lot, because it really truly recognizes them as their children.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we got a special treat for you. Join our free Facebook group where you can connect with other amazing women and share your thoughts. Join us by clicking in the link in the show notes. We can't wait to welcome you into our supportive community. And don't forget to come back for our next episode, where we'll be sharing even more inspiring stories, encouraging tips, educational insights, and practical strategies. Oh, and before you go, we have a tiny favor to ask. If you found today's episode uplifting and helpful, please leave us a review. It's like giving us a virtual hug, and it helps other amazing women like you find our show. Plus, it makes us smile from ear to ear. And hey, why stop there? Share the love. Tell your Betsy's, your mom, your sister, and even your favorite barista about our podcast. The more, the merrier.